I'm very pleased to introduce Joe Hankel today. Most of you know him. He grew up in our church, went to Centennial High School. Then he went to Iowa State, where he majored in materials engineering, physics, and mathematics.
Wow.
Graduated in May of 2018. In August of 2018, he joined the Peace Corps. He was assigned to Namibia, where he taught secondary school math and science. He was evacuated in March of 2020, along with 7,000 Peace Corps volunteers worldwide due to the coronavirus. He's here to talk today to talk about Namibia and the work the Peace Corps is doing there. So, Joe, welcome.
Thank you. All right. Anyway, good morning. It's good to see all of you. As Lauren said, I'm going to tell you a bit about this amazing country and some of the work that the Peace Corps is doing over there. In order to really understand modern Namibia, I think it's very helpful to have some of its history and culture. So we'll start off with some of that and geography, and then we'll move into modern Namibia and what the Peace Corps is doing. All right, so this is a map of Namibia. It borders South Africa, Botswana, Angola, and Zambia. And it has an area of about 320,000 square miles, which is about 3 times the size of Texas. The estimated population there is 2.7 million, which is roughly the same as Chicago. And this means that Namibia is the second least densely populated country in the world.
Oh my.
It's located between the Namib and Kalahari deserts. The Namib runs along its west coast, and it is the oldest desert in the world. There are only 4 perennial rivers. The Kunene River, which is the little squiggle along the northwestern border. The Kavango River, which is another little squiggle along the northern border. The Zambezi River, which is up to the northeast, kind of along that strip. And then the Orange River makes its southern border. Now the cities, the major cities, the capital is located in the center, right around here. To the south is a small town on the coast called Lüderitz, which I'll be talking about some more. Up here is Swakopmund and Walvis Bay, which are their big ports. And then I was located, my site was along the river up here in the Kavango area. Now, until 1990, this territory was known as Southwest Africa. Only once it gained independence did it become known as Namibia. So if I reference Southwest Africa or Namibia throughout the presentation, they mean essentially the same thing. Now, Namibia receives 300 days of sun a year. It's one of the sunniest countries in the world. And depending on where you are in the country, the rainfall varies between 0 and roughly 2 feet a year. Most of that rain is going to be in the Caprivi Strip, which was that small little stick out. This is a picture of the Atlantic Ocean, the Namibian coastline near Swakopmund. Over on our left, this is a picture of some of the sand dunes between Swakopmund and Walvis Bay in the world. And on the right is a picture of the Kavango River at sunset. This is after it had rained heavily. Namibia has some of the most diverse wildlife in Africa. On the left is a red velvet mite. The locals call them Nyambi, which means God, because after it rains, they come out of the ground and it's as if they are resurrecting. The beetle on the right, I don't know what it is. It's the only one I've seen, but it's I thought it was cool.
It is cool.
To the left is an elephant. It's a picture that my friend took on one of her conservation walks. To the right it's a small burrowing lizard that lives in the Namib desert, and it cannot stay for extended periods in the sun. It'll essentially get sunburn on its organs because its skin is clear. To the left here is a locust that I think it's a locust. I'm not actually positive on that. And again, it's something I've never been able to find an answer or find a name for from anyone. And to the right are some hippos. My house was maybe 100 yards from the river where these hippos were living. So, now Namibian culture is extremely diverse. The country formally recognizes 11 ethnic, 11 ethnic groups, but they also realize that these ethnic groups are really contain much smaller groups inside them. Some important ones for this presentation are the Herero, which I'll be talking about more in a few slides. The San people are sort of the original Southern Africans, and they go back for thousands and thousands of years. The Coloreds are a group of mixed race people that claim African heritage. The Basters are, again, a group of mixed race Namibians, but they are specifically the children of white men and Nama women, in particular around the Rehoboth area, which is a little bit south of the capital. And then the other group that I mostly worked with are the Mbukushu, which is a smaller group in the Kavango family. And I did learn some of their language, which is only spoken by about 50,000 people worldwide. Right. Now, so there's evidence in Namibia of some of the earliest humans. They've found hominoid jaws dating back 13 million years. This is a picture of a cave painting in the Otavi mountain range, and it's dated to around 4,000 years ago. The Nama, which are an offshoot of the San people, settled there around 2,000 years ago, and the Bantu expansion happened around 500, 600 years ago, which is part of the cause for all of the diversity. Now, the Portuguese, Dutch, and English were all early explorers of the area. When the English eventually took control of Walvis Bay, English missionaries started to enter the country, and they built this church, which is believed to be the first church in Namibia. But principal colonists or primary colonists were the Germans. And around 1840, German missionaries entered the country. In the 1880s, this man, Adolf Luderitz, bought some land and pushed Otto von Bismarck to claim Southwest Africa for Germany because he was afraid of the English. And he did so. Otto von Bismarck did claim that territory at the Berlin Conference later that year. Naturally, local groups resisted this occupation. There were some rebellions, and in 1904, Herero groups killed around 150 remote German farmers. This led to reprisals by Germany, which installed a despot as governor and military commander. That governor was Lothar von Trotha, and he really started what was the first genocide of the 20th century here. And it became a practice for the Holocaust later. So Trotha overwhelmed locals with military superiority, and he wasn't actually satisfied with just beating them on the battlefield. He pushed an ideology of cleansing humanity. So he ordered troops to hunt the Hereros and chase them into the desert, and they cut off their water supplies, and they were ordered to shoot and kill any of them they found on site. And so eventually, under international pressure, Germany stopped the this chase and instead rounded up prisoners into concentration camps. In these concentration camps, they were starved, they became forced labor, and they had medical experiments performed on them. Eugen Fischer was one of the scientists who performed these experiments, and his work laid the foundation for the Nuremberg laws. And one of his students was a mentor to Joseph Mengele. So there's a pretty direct personal connection between the events here and the Holocaust later. Eventually, under more international pressure, Germany closed these concentration camps, and instead they essentially enslaved the survivors, and they instituted a law where every Herero over the age of 7 was given a registration number. And these are Hereros that have been enslaved. Now, 1914, World War I started, right? And after World War I, Germany lost Southwest Africa. And the League of Nations gave control to South Africa. This was presumably supposed to be held in the best interest of the people that were there. Now, later in the 60s, the international community was generally supportive of Namibian independence and pressuring South Africa to relieve or relinquish their control. Instead, South Africa didn't leave, and they segregated the area into Bantustans, which are these groups. There's a map here. And it's to strengthen their white minority control. So every ethnic group is geographically isolated from each other and given different ranks. Right. So for almost 30 years, Namibia was caught up in an extremely involved proxy war that involved the Angolan Civil War as well. I'm sure many of you remember the Cold War better than I do. So it was all tied up in that. The Namibian independence movement was given military support from Cuba, USSR, China, and North Korea. And here there's a Cuban tank. Cuba also sent many soldiers to help with the Angolan Civil War. And then below that is a picture of a Soviet or a USSR trainer working with members of the People's Liberation Army of Namibia. So later, this sort of non-country was at war until 1988, when the U.S. mediated an agreement which brought the withdrawal of any foreign troops. In November of '89, they held their first elections, and they chose English as their official language because it was not language of the oppressor, which at the time was Afrikaans. And it didn't favor any particular ethnic group. Now the issue is that nobody spoke English. So on January 1st, the Prime Minister at the time asked the US for Peace Corps volunteers in education to help teach English. And the letter he wrote didn't even have an official letterhead or anything like that. So Namibia is now a functioning democracy, very similar to the US. The president serves terms of 5 years, and they can serve a maximum of 3 years each. So yeah, it's otherwise very, very similar. They have many more parties than us. So. Now, Namibia is one of the wealthiest countries in Southern Africa, but it is almost universally ranked as the second in the world in income disparity. Their major sources of income are mining, particularly diamond mining, and then agriculture and tourism. All right. So the Peace Corps goals are given here, and they've remained pretty much unchanged since 1961, when the Peace Corps was created. The first goal is to help interested countries in meeting their need for trained men and women, and this is usually interpreted as providing support for locals, not sending trained people to do the work, which is why education is the biggest sector. The other two goals have to do with developing friendship and understanding between countries. Now, typically, we don't just go there and start working. They train us for 10 to 11 weeks once we're there, and it covers the various topics that I've listed here. And it's pretty involved. It's a lot of work. To the right is a picture of kind of a typical training day. We're all at tables. There are presenters covering any of those different topics. It's a lot of hours spent sitting in those hard wooden chairs. To the left is a picture of my language group and our trainer. So we learned the Makushe, and we were all pretty much in the same area when we actually went to the site. Now, training finishes when we are sworn in by the ambassador, and that's when the 2 years starts. So once that happens, we work for 2 years with host country nationals and locals on whatever project we've been assigned to. In my case, it was education. A lot of people ask about housing, and it varies depending on who you ask. This is a picture of one of my friends' houses. So they have cinder block walls and a thatch roof, but other people have mud walls and a tin roof. And I was in teacher housing from the school. So it runs the full spectrum. Now, Peace Corps does a lot of different things. The biggest sector in Peace Corps Namibia is education, and but volunteers from all sectors will help their counterparts and locals find resources, and they run camps. So the picture to the right is a picture of the girls at GLOW, which stands for Girls Leading Our World. It's a camp I helped run, and it covers topics like sexual health, independence, education planning, that sort of thing. And it lasts for about a week. We try to get in around 50 learners from different schools in our area, and it's fully partnered with other Namibian teachers. So yeah, we also would do camps for boys called BRO, which is Boys Respecting Others, and for Camp Yeah, which was youth excelling and achieving in health, and that one was co-ed. All of these camps are about a week, and we try to reach around 50 to 60 learners. And that's all funded by the Peace Corps. So in Namibian education, most learners will speak some mother tongue at home. In my area, it was predominantly Thimbukushu. In others, it could be Herero, it could be Vambo, it might be Rukwangali, but most are not speaking English at home. So around 4th grade, all of their classes switch to English, which produces a very hard change for them. The failure rate in 4th grade usually spikes simply because the language of instruction changes. These are learners that attend my school, so that's the uniform they would wear every day. Most schools in Namibia are boarding schools of some sort. So there's a hostel, and they provide meals for the learners. To the left is a picture of 2 of my colleagues, Mr. Neonga on the left and Mr. Haushiku on the right. Mr. Neonga teaches math. Mr. Haushiku teaches finance. And to the right are a couple classrooms. Now this block is actually much longer to the left, and there were, I believe, 8 blocks at my school like this. At my school, learners would stay in their classrooms and teachers would rotate. And the age range of learners might be anywhere between what we would expect in the US in their early teens to 25, 26, sometimes 27. And that goes back to the English problem. Most of them will fail in 4th grade. They may fail again in 6th or 7th grade, simply because they never learned something because they didn't have the language for it. Right. So to the left is a picture of my school's courtyard. It is, this is after the rainy season, so it's nice and green now. To the right is a picture of the front gate. The school is gated, and teacher housing is also on site. Now I say it's gated, and that mostly keeps people out, but cows and goats and chickens like to roam pretty freely anyway. And this was the picture on the right was taken during a heavy rainstorm. So you might be able to tell it's slightly flooded at that point. It had been raining for maybe 10 minutes. Now, a typical school day for learners would start around 4:30 a.m. They'd wake up and they would shower and get dressed, and there would be roughly, at my school, 1,800 learners in the hostel. So, it takes time to get that many people through showers and ready. Breakfast was around 6. The school day started at 7:20, and for the staff, there was a meeting at 7. At 10 o'clock, there would be a break. This is kind of a little recess. People would usually get food. Some local women, we call them memes, which is a respectful term, similar to Mrs., or it actually means mother, but they would bring in fat cakes, which are small fried dough balls or to sell to learners. After that, the break is usually about half an hour. Classes resume, and eventually the school ends or takes another recess for lunch around 1 o'clock. After that, there's an afternoon study at 3 o'clock, and this includes even the day learners, which might not live in the hostel. Now that ends around 5, and dinner is provided for hostel learners. Typically the day learners who walk in will go home at that point. Then evening study starts for the hostel learners that are still there. Evening study ends around 9, and they're expected to be in bed around 10, and then the cycle repeats. And they wake up again at 4:30 the next morning. Weekends are a little more relaxed. They usually wake up later, and there's usually only study in the morning. Right. So these are just pictures of Namibia. To the left is the Kavango River. The Kavango is one of the less sunny areas. It's certainly sunny, but there are almost always clouds out. To the right is one of the gravel roads that would lead to my school. It was all down dirt paths. This is a panoramic shot of, there's a small shopping town near me called Divundu, and this is actually outside of their secondary school, which is a little bit hard to see in the background there, but along here. These are just shots I enjoyed. To the left is actually, there's Rundu, which is the second largest town in Namibia at roughly 80,000 people. And to the right is another shot outside my school. Right. Now to the left here, it's a sunset shot of their power lines. Most of their power is generated in country, although this I think is actually generated in Botswana. And then to the right is I believe a sunset shot of Etosha National Park. So, all right. I think everyone can unmute now if they would like, and I'm open for questions.
That was excellent, Joe.
Thank you.
I'm curious, Joe, if the curriculum is anywhere similar to what you would expect in the United States?
Yes and no. When it comes to math, it covers all of the same things for sure, but the ordering is different. So they have a national curriculum, and they have national tests. So now it's the system has been changing a little bit over the last couple of years, but I believe now it's in 11th grade. They take their like final placement tests, and if they are thinking about university, they'll go on to grade 12. Otherwise, they'll probably go to a trade school or work on their farms or something like that. So as far as math goes, yes, the curricula are similar, but again, they're structured differently. Here we have, we spend a year on algebra and then a year on geometry and then maybe another year on algebra and then some trigonometry and so on. There they spend a few weeks on algebra, then a few weeks on geometry, then a few weeks on other things, and then the next year it goes back, and each time they add a little more. There are pluses and minuses to it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
In science, generally, it's a little more comprehensive than here. They have required science courses, general science courses, all the way up into 9th grade. Starting in 8th grade, they have both a life science course and a physical science course at the same time. So, they're taking a little more science than us. Again, it still has its pluses and minuses. I know a lot of learners get a little overloaded. Obviously, my school's schedule is pretty regimented and strict, and a lot of learners end up tired. So,
Joe, can you tell us how this experience, interrupted as it was, may have affected you, what you've learned, and also what's the future, both for the program and your work in Namibia?
So it was disappointing to have to go home. I still had 6 months, and a lot of the projects I was working on just kind of got dropped. Now, not completely. I was working with some colleagues of mine, so they have continued it a bit. But all of the funding that I know for other Peace Corps volunteers, all of that was ended when the volunteer left. As far as continuing the program, the Peace Corps hasn't shut down. They've just returned all of the volunteers. They are hoping to be able to send volunteers back to Namibia sometime in March. We'll see if that happens. And as far as my continuation there, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
It depends on a lot of different things. Partly what, how soon it gets running, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's still hopeful though. I mean, all of the staff are still there. The coronavirus has generally not affected the country too terribly much. When I left, there were some imported cases, and after a couple of weeks, there were no new cases. I believe in late June, some truckers from South Africa broke their quarantine, and it's spread since then, particularly around Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, and and Windhoek, the capital. Otherwise, though, it's a very sparse country. They've dealt with Ebola. They've been dealing with HIV for decades. So they know how to deal with pandemics pretty well. Yeah, it's been a pretty organized response there.
What have you been doing in the meantime while you're waiting to see whether you're going back or not?
I've been doing some job searching. I'm currently working at Dr. G's Brainworks with
Good.
John Dimmitt III. But yeah, it's a temporary position. So I'm still looking for work. It's been kind of tough, but I have friends that I'm reaching out to see what they can tell me what might be on offer.
What supports Namibia's economy?
China, by and large. The Chinese government, they buy a lot of their minerals. So Namibia supports about 10% of the world's uranium supply, and they only have 2 uranium mines. They also export copper, iron, zinc, gold, that sort of thing. Now, diamonds are a big profit maker for them, but mining in general doesn't supply too many jobs. Tourism is probably the biggest formal job provider, and then agriculture would be, it's mostly subsistence, but it supports about 50% of the population. Now they do import it's like 50% of their cereal grains, and I think 60 or 70% of their food as a whole, and I believe 50% of that total food import is from South Africa. But they're trying to grow their agricultural production. A lot of the land in the Zambezi and Kavango are good for different cash crops. It can be a little bit sandy sometimes, but some cash crops actually like that. Now, China has really practiced, I would call it economic imperialism on Africa as a whole. And one of their tactics, they're very open about it, is they promise to give Namibia, in this case, money for some project they want to work on. It might be roads, it might be a hospital, whatever. And as part of that, China requires that Namibia purchase certain things from China. So, if they're working on a road or building, it would be concrete or steel or what have you. So it's led to this Namibia's rise in debt, I guess, to China. At this point, China owns the largest cement factory in Namibia, and China also owns their port, Walvis Bay. Well, it's a lent lease arrangement, but it's as a result of this.
So what were the tourist,
mechanism for the
what
wealth
are the tourist destinations mainly?
The tourist destinations?
Yes.
Most of the tourist destinations are going to be around or along the coast or around wildlife. So Etosha National Park is it's in the north central part of the country. It's huge. It's like the size of Rhode Island or something like that. I think it's 3 or 4 times bigger than Yellowstone. So yeah, and they have rhinos there. They have elephants, lions, you name it. They probably have it. Now you probably won't see rhinos because they're pretty heavily protected, and they don't like to draw attention to them to dissuade poachers. The other, or one of the other big national parks is Bwabwata, which was right across the river from me. And it does not have rhinos, but it has monkeys instead, has a few other things, hippos that Etosha doesn't have. And again, that's pretty big. A large part of it is, or the San people live there, and that's been a dispute between the Namibian government and the San people. There's a lot of prejudice towards them because the South African military used the San to track guerrilla units during the war. The San are known for their tracking. They can tell how long it's been and whether it's an elephant and which direction they've gone and all that stuff.
Avoid the wind.
So they're pretty adept.
Does it bring any concern that the English instruction kind of reminds me of what occurred with American Indians here, and in particular in Canada, where children were sent off to boarding schools and taught exclusively in English. Is there any concern in the country about the native tongues?
No, actually. So they all speak it at home, and all of their, throughout their entire schooling, they take classes in their native tongue. So the first 3 grades are taught in their home language. They do have English class, which is taught in English during those years, but otherwise they really try to preserve that. Yeah, it's pretty extensive. They study literature and stories and culture in those classes as well. At my school, in my region, there's a traditional performance competition, and so they sing traditional songs or perform traditional dances and that sort of thing. And my school actually ended up winning for the region. So yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into that in preserving those things.
Thank you.
Are there many opportunities, Joe, as kids are graduating, or if they don't go to the university? I think of Malawi, where I feel like it's so hard to get work and so hard to find a way to make a living. I'm curious how it is in Namibia.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult. Some will go off to college. Nursing and teaching are the big ones that people study right now. Now, unfortunately for nurses, they have too many, and a lot of them are still unemployed. Well, actually, I don't know if that's true with the coronavirus pandemic, but it was true before I left. Let's put it that way. Other than that, a lot of them do work outside of the country. South Africa tends to pay better for skilled labor and manufacturing positions, so they sort of siphon that off. Another issue is that a lot of the technical and really educated professions are mostly held by white people still, which I think make up only 10% or less of the population. So, yeah.
Joe, this is Joe. I just wondered, do you think this was the opportunity of a lifetime?
Yeah, I do.
Good.
Yeah, I'm very glad I've been able to go and have the opportunity. It's certainly not easy.
Oh. So it seems the schedule of the students was quite rigorous, getting up at 4:30 in the morning. First, what is their general attitude toward learning? And second, did you have to get up at 4:30 in the morning?
I did not, thankfully. I got up around 6, sometimes 5:30, depended a little bit. I tried to be at the school by 6:45. Our principal was very strict about showing up on time and showing up early. So I tried to be there 15 minutes early. We usually started the meeting around 7. But otherwise, no, I did not have to wake up at that early.
And the voting stuff away.
The students, most of them are not huge fans of having to wake up that early. Some of them don't really notice or see the difference. They think it's fairly normal, and at a lot of boarding schools, it is fairly normal. My class sizes were around 50 or more than 50. I think the average was 52. My highest was 59. Some other volunteers I know had classes in the 60s. So there are a lot of learners, and if you're going to feed them and make sure they're all showering, that sort of thing, it takes a lot of time, and I don't know that there's much or a much better solution, but.
Were the kids going home on the weekends and stuff, or how'd that work?
Hostel kids, so they could sometimes get leave on the weekends, and then there were also scheduled holidays where they would go home, be with their family, that sort of thing, and that was set by the national school calendar.
Are all the schools government schools, or are there private schools?
There are private schools. There are not very many private schools. They're mostly located in the cities and more populated areas, and they are predominantly white. Some of them are German schools, for instance. They teach all in German, that sort of thing. But the ones that Peace Corps volunteers worked at were all government schools.
Are there discipline issues, Joe, at all in the schools?
Yes, but it depends on where you are. So the region I was in Kavango and in the Zambezi, the discipline issues are pretty light. most of the learners really want to be there and see it as an opportunity to, you know, a different life. Now at my school, I did have a lot of learners sleeping, and that's, you know, they got 6 hours or so of sleep every night. So you know, it was tough to make to enforce that. Outside of that, or outside of those regions, it can be a much bigger problem. It's not necessarily that students don't want to be there. It's just this sort of imprinted culture, I guess, from colonial times. Those rebellions were led by the Nama and the Herero, and you know, they've sort of, a lot of kids will say, well, I'm Nama, so, you know, I fight, and so they'll go and fight each other. Similar with Hereros. Now, this was also part of apartheid. What they did when they made these Bantu stands was assign stereotypes to each group to help prevent trust between the groups. So the Vombos were known to steal, but they were very smart, or something like that. The Kavango groups worked very hard, but they, you know, weren't very smart. That sort of thing, and it still persists today. Absolutely. There was at one of the university campuses a small group that were not made of students spread a bunch of hate speech and posters against Vombos while I was there. It was a big deal. People called for, you know, killing them and that sort of thing. Nothing happened from it, but yeah.
Joe, I'm just curious. What is the birth rate, and are there a lot of teenage mothers, or what?
I'm not actually sure on the birth rate. The general population is pretty young. I think the average age is in its 30s. There are a lot of teenage pregnancies, and that's one of the things that we worked on with these camps. Part of it is that if the pregnancy rate goes down, that's also correlated to the HIV rate, infection rate going down. So those camps were mostly funded by Peace Corps and by the U.S. Has a specific HIV source of funding that President Bush signed. But yeah, it's a growing population for sure. There are, I think, I would say probably 30% of my female students had children. And that's another reason for the large age range in the schools. Usually around 8th grade, a girl might get pregnant, spend a year or two away from school, and then come back. And you can see that there's a large spike in age between 8th and 9th grade.
Wow.
Yeah, so the thing about the population, though, is that a lot of people are moving out of the country as well, just to find jobs. So high-ish birth rate. A lot of people leaving.
So what did you do in the off hours when you were not in the classroom? Did you have other Peace Corps folks with you, or what was your social group?
My social group was mostly teachers at my school. There were no Peace Corps volunteers at my school, but the two other people in my language group that I showed were nearby. One of them was, well, at any given point in time, I was within 5 or 6 kilometers, so 3 or so miles from one of them, and we might hang out on the weekends. But most of our social group during the week were other teachers. Now, when we weren't teaching, we were mostly doing lesson planning, grading, that sort of thing. I had 250 learners at one point, and we have to give regular homework, and that requires a lot of time just to mark all of those papers.
So did you go to Malawi when in high school yourself or college with the church?
Who?
Did you go to Malawi with the church?
No, I did not.
Okay, just wondering just kind of what your interest was in deciding to do Peace Corps, what got you there?
So I had a friend, this was fall of 2017. I had a friend who had graduated the year before and spent a few months in, I believe it was Chile, helping with at hospitals. She was going into medical school, and I had thought, oh yeah, I would like to volunteer. I was thinking about going to grad school, but I thought it'd be nice to volunteer over the summer before going. I had looked into different organizations for that, and most of them were not really what I was looking for. Certainly the Malawi mission at our church influenced my thinking in that. I didn't see short stints of volunteering as very productive. It requires some sort of lasting connection. So I was looking for something, either an organization that was well connected, where I could spend several months there. And then I believe my mom or dad, I think my mom, recommended I look into the Peace Corps. I had thought, oh, that's 2 whole years, I don't know, yada, yada, yada. And we met up with some returned volunteers from South Africa. They told me their story, and it sounded like fun, so I applied.
Hey, good for you.
Do you feel
Right, so it's a little bit after 12. So if somebody has one more question, and then thank you, Joe, for spending so much time with us. Very interesting.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Joe, so much.
No problem.
Anybody have a last question they want to ask?
I guess I just ask as a last question, Joe, did you feel like the Peace Corps and your role and your being there was well received by the Namibian people? Or do you feel like they see you as kind of coming in and like, I don't know. I know that South Africa had a lot of that, not wanting whites to come in as much when I first went to Malawi, and I just was curious.
Yes, I would say we are very well received, sometimes too well received. I definitely faced some problems where my expectations of the work was not meeting their expectations in terms of what my responsibilities were and what I was capable of. I was a teacher. Wasn't trained to be a teacher, so yeah, there were some issues with class load, that sort of thing. But yeah, generally we are very well liked there. Americans in general, I think, are pretty well liked. Although we get confused with Europeans a lot. So.
That's good.
All right, thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
listening.
Great to learn about it.
Nice nature.
Good luck as you
All
keep
right.
moving forward.
Yep.
I share the love of cloud formations, beautiful pictures.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are lots of very nice sunsets and clouds in Namibia. Certainly a good environment for it.
Great.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joe.